and hopefully there's some time, Angela, for some questions.
Yes, we have some about 10 minutes left for questions. Thank you so much, Johan. I think it's always interesting to see these use cases, these real life use cases. I know you guys at AWA work with many different companies, and it's just so interesting to see with such the little changes that you can make through user feedback that can have just huge impact. So those are always interesting to see. Yeah, and I think, you know, it all goes back to context, right? I mean, you don't want to disrupt the buying process, but you definitely need to collect the right feedback from your users. And how you do that is being able to develop the right questions, target the right people, ask at the right time, which brings us to a question we have in the queue regarding segmentation. So the question is, so when it comes to segmenting, what factors should you prioritize first? So in terms of, you know, like behaviors or, you know, type of visitor, how do you determine, once you've decided that, okay, this is, you know, we want to start asking users for feedback because we do need to move users through the funnel process, and they're just not progressing. How do you decide what to prioritize first when it comes to segmentation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Michael, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as well, because you made the point earlier, and I agree with that completely, that with segmentation, one way to approach it is to look at the metrics that you're trying to improve, and that often will point to the segments that you want to hear from. Other ways to do it, it really starts with that objective. It starts with that question: what problem am I trying to solve? What area of the site am I trying to illuminate? Let's say, for example, it has to do with the browser issue. Then you might want to target specific browsers. I've had this as an example where, you know, in GA we spot, or there seems to be, it's at that stage an hypothesis that there is an issue with one particular browser, and you know, then how do you find out what that problem is? Well, you can do usability testing, you can do some runs through on the site on your own, or you could simply make a corollary question live targeting that browser and let it run in the background, and the information will present itself to you without you having to dig for it too hard, and without you having to walk through it yourself. Because the reality is, maybe it doesn't happen to you, maybe you don't spot exactly what the issue is. So that's one way of thinking about it. Michael?
Yeah, I was actually going to say, definitely asking the question, what problem are we trying to solve? But going just a little bit further with that is, so once you have identified the problem you're trying to solve, who is that problem affecting and where is that happening? So you ask the who, what, when, where, and why questions around this. And then based on that, you know, once you have all of that laid out, then you ask, you know, who or what do we need to know while keeping those factors in mind? So who do we need to ask in order to solve this problem? And then, you know, where do we need to ask these questions as well? So I think you encapsulated that perfectly.
Another question that we had in the queue had to do with if in the interest of not pouncing on a new visitor, how often do you typically wait before asking a question to a user on site? And I think this goes back to, Michael, you had talked a little bit about survey fatigue earlier in the presentation. I guess, you know, how do you ensure you're not over asking the same user? You know what I mean? That I think that's what the question is asking.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very difficult to answer that in a broad range. But if we wanted to be more specific and get a little bit more formulaic with our methods, you could take a look at the number of pages or the average page visits each user on site has. And then, of course, you want to segment on where in the site that they're actually visiting. So let's say that it's, you know, pre-purchase, they're just browsing your site. What are the average amount of pages that they're visiting, and how long do they tend to stay on each of those pages? And both of those metrics can be very indicative of how you should target. So let's say that the average pages visited are 3, then it would be appropriate to ask them on the second page visit. And then let's say that they take 20 seconds on each page. maybe take that, cut that in half and say, I'm going to fire the survey after 10 seconds on that particular page. But of course, once you're behind a login wall, there are different problems that the customer is solving for. Essentially, it is a different sales conversation. So it can be very specific, but using the metrics that you have in order to ask the question at the right time can be very helpful. Is there anything you'd like to add on that, Johan?
No, I think you covered it well, Michael. Just one thing to say, that the rule that I apply is that I want any one user to be exposed to only one question in their journey.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
The last question is more product specific to Qualaroo regarding targeting capabilities. What kind of targeting capabilities does Qualaroo have?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I'd be more than happy to describe. And then Johan, I'd love to get your insights on how you actually put these into action. But, you know, we do have custom property targeting. Let's say you want to segment your audience based on the type of plan they have in conjunction with the number of days since they last purchased. You can utilize that metric. If you wanted to track, you know, brand new users to your site, you could use cookie targeting and use the cookies that we drop with the JavaScript snippet on site to understand whether they're a new user, or there are quite a few use cases around that as well. You can target by the geographical location of their IP address. You can target based on the behaviors, of course, with the pages visited and time on page. And then we do also have the identity feature. So if there is identity information, whether they're logged in or not, whether that's present, you can fire a survey for those users. And I also want to mention that all of these targeting metrics that you can utilize to reach the right audience can also be used to supplement your data. You can pass through these custom properties and identity features and locations and where they provided this feedback as metadata to help understand, you know, what is the persona of the actual respondent? What are they using? Where are their pain points, to get a better understanding of their successes and failures, ultimately allowing you to make better business decisions around that information.
Michael, just one thing to add there, and we spoke about integrations earlier on. This is not as much targeting, but related to that point. And the one integration we didn't talk about was integration with something like Optimizely, famous for you know, A/B testing and allowing you to split test your changes. And this is a great way of using Qualaroo. That end of the process as well. We've spoken a lot about how do you generate those insights and those hypotheses that give rise to these tests, give birth to these tests, but you can actually use Qualaroo to inform your understanding of why a variant in a test behaved in the way that it did behave, whether it's up or down, whether it's negative or positive. It's good. It's not just enough knowing that it was up or down. The real insight comes from understanding what's behind that shift in behavior. And by firing a Qualaroo question at that variant and at the control for that matter, you can understand what is it that drives the behavior or didn't affect the change.
Great. Thank you so much, Johan. I think that wraps up our conversation. It's always a pleasure to have you on these webinars with these amazing insights. So what we're going to do is, like I said, we'll be sending out this recording to everyone register for this webinar, and we'll include the deck and the Q&A. We'll go in a little bit in depth, as well as include some kind of some how-tos and how you can accomplish some of these in the way you implement feedback on your website. Michael has some great articles that he'll be able to share. And so we'll include that in the follow-up. And that will conclude today's session. Thank you very much. Thank you, Johan.
Thank you.